Welcome back, Planeswalkers, to another episode of the Hive Mind. My name is Jon Dunning. This is the show where I traverse the multiverse in search of other prominent members of the Magic the Gathering community. And while you're out traversing, why don't you head on over to cardsphere.com. That's right, cardsphere.com is the very best place to buy, sell, and trade your paper Magic the Gathering cards online. While you're out traversing, you can head on over to inkedgaming.com, enter a promo code HiveMindMTG to receive 10% off your purchase. Without further ado, I would like to tell you who is planeswalking in today, and we are making our trip back to Canada, this time from Montreal. Please welcome legendary streamer and content creator Noxious. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you. Wow, legendary streamer, huh? Okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. No worries. I'll take it.
Absolutely, man. I mean, you've been here for a while. Maybe not everyone in the community knows you because of the other. You were huge in other communities, but you're here now and you're taking it over by storm.
Yeah, I mean, I really just started streaming Magic with Arena, right? So it's not quite like I've been a known entity forever, but I was streaming other card games before. You know, played some Hearthstone, some of it.
Just a little bit, right?
Just a bit.
Yeah. So I like to start out each and every episode with asking you, what is the biggest way that Magic the Gathering specifically has impacted your life in a positive way?
Oh my God. Okay, so I think I will like it. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I think it's the game that launched any bit of interest that I had in game design. Like when I was very, very young. And it's probably, I think that game design approach to, I guess, systems analysis is probably what formed, like at least shaped the way that I view systems. And Magic had a big role in at least developing that interest. So yeah, that was a pretty big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Streaming other games and been involved as a gamer for a very long time. But what is specifically your Magic origin story?
Oh boy. Okay, so I started playing way back in the day. So I must have been like 6 when I picked up my first Magic card. So I was born in 89, so that was like, I'd say maybe 1996 was about the time where it happened. And I mean, that was around, I think, 4th edition, if I'm not mistaken. And a lady taught me how to play. I went into a video rental store. Rest in peace. You're all dead now. You no longer exist.
Hey, there's one left, and it's in Canada. There's a Blockbuster.
I believe it. I don't know. I just don't know where you can rent things anymore that aren't online.
Right.
And so I went in the store with my parents, renting some movies, and in the back of the store, I still remember there was this black door, and it was surrounded with fantasy creature posters and images and stuff, and it led down to a basement.
Oh
so
my
it looked
God.
like it looked pretty scary, right? And so I'm like, what is this? And the lady who's at the counter tells us that that's where they play board games. So obviously they're playing all sorts of stuff at that point.
Yeah.
And apparently they're open to teaching even young kids. So they're like, oh, do you want to pass by one day? And I'm like, yeah, sure, totally. So I show up there, and then they show me the ropes of Magic. And during that week, I started buying card packs and playing Magic, to the best of my 6-year-old ability.
Well, first off, congratulations on surviving the deep and dark dungeon, because that took some gumption to go down there. But yeah, all the old LGSs had that certain kind of stank about them. I almost miss how they all felt a little dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't I feel like there were less of them, and you had to know where they were in the first place. Like, we didn't have cell phones or, Google Maps to figure out, like, closest LGS that can attend. Like, it's word of mouth that gets you there.
Yeah.
So I guess a lot of one of the big signals was, you'd have on the windows posters that said, "We sell Magic cards here." Like, they would clearly label the shop as being a Magic shop, and it often had, like, a small or big area to play. But yeah, that was definitely the origin story. I played there for years, and eventually the store closed down, like they are very prone to do. So
what was your did you just kind of put all the light colors together and make just like red deck, green deck, black deck like a lot of people do when they start out, or did you kind of...
It's more that when I started playing, I came into a metagame that was basically Necropotence, and it was like, as we're referring to it now, it's Necropotence Winter, which was basically an era where the only viable deck was effectively just a series of Necropotence decks. That was it. And the way to combat that was with Stasis. If you played Turbo Stasis with like Felden's Cane and you bounce your stuff, use recursion, you could actually beat them. And so I was introduced very quickly to the meta game because they were playing competitive decks, as competitive as they got. People were playing, Sarah Angels and Elvish Archers. It's like the decks were as good as they could be back then. And, the Necropotence guys they didn't mess around. They were just Necropotencing one another. And apparently that deck was discovered, the Stasis build. And that's the first deck that I remember having built. Like that somebody built for me and that I actually learned to play real Magic with.
Yeah, sure. I mean, to give you, I'm as old as rocks. I'm a bit older than you. So, but to give you context, my first tournament that I won was a Nether Shadow Infinite combo with Fallen Angel, and I beat an Ernageddon deck. So,
Yeah, there you go. See,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
it. That's what it is. Yeah.
Magic was very different back in the day, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. I mean, that Nether Shadow was a real threat. Like, and it's crazy because you look at these old cards sometimes and you're like, in a way, a lot of them are way better than what we have now. And in a lot of them are awful compared to the stuff we have now. It's like there's no in between. Either they're completely broken or they're just completely useless. Like there's no middle ground.
I think Creatures definitely stepped up since then. Creatures used to be one of the worst things you could do, where the spells were just so fantastic, and especially like how unbalanced the colors were. Because literally, what was the reason not to just play black or mono blue back in the day? Because black, you had your mana ramp, you had your direct damage with like your drain life and corrupts and all that. You really didn't. And white was the weakest one. Now you can't go to a tournament without playing white or green or or even Simic, which we'll get to later.
Yeah, we all had like there was always this person at the LGS that was crazy big into Anthem decks. And they'd be playing
Sure.
like mono white decks.
Yeah.
With anthems, but like that's pretty much the one guy, and like everything they played died. So it really didn't do much. Like Armageddon decks were probably the only way to play white realistically, and that wasn't often even resolving anyway. So it didn't do anything. It was like it's too late. Turn 1, Dark Ritual, Necro. Oh, okay, game over.
Yeah.
So it didn't really matter, but yeah.
What was your did you have like a pet card back then, or even like a pet deck that you could remember?
Oh wow. Well, I mean, Stasis is still a card that I look back fondly on, as the way that it shaped how I learned to appreciate Magic and what types of decks I learned to like. But a pet card that I tried to make work, not really. I'd say that I tried Gauntlets of Might a bunch. The whole double red, that the buffs the red creatures and makes your mountains add additional mana was a card that I always wanted to be good. Like it was okay. But it was, it's fast mana, but not fast enough, effectively. So it was like, it was just a fun card. But comparing it to stuff that we have nowadays, like even the fun cards back then were kind of boring. There's not a whole lot of brewing to do with them. So
what is your favorite kind of play style? Or you've been involved with the game a lot longer than I thought, as long as I have, pretty much. So you've seen so many, and I'm sure you've taken breaks here and there, as we all kind of tend to do, and then we get back on the wagon. What has been your favorite set or kind of play style or format in general since you've been playing?
I think my favorite format of all time was Onslaught Block Constructed, probably.
Nice. Yeah.
Which is extremely specific. There were, a lot of cool combos. I used to love Solitary Confinement, Genesis. Those were really fun. Like you would discard the card and then, you would lock people out of interacting with you, which I used to enjoy. It's basically, again, like the whole prison theme. But there was like a deck cost to it, right? Your deck was the prison. Like you couldn't just have a prison card in it. It had to be the entire goal of it, or at least a big chunk of it. So that was probably my favorite format, the one that I felt like I enjoyed the most when it was current. But in terms of playstyles, yeah, like the whole locking people out of games, with prison builds is what I like. The thing is, I'm also very peculiar on that front. Like I don't like just prison cards in general. Like a good example in Standard that I, obviously dislike is stuff like Teferi and Narset. Like I really don't like those cards because they have prison abilities slapped onto them. Like, oh, opponent cannot draw cards more than one per turn, or they can't play instant speed cards. Those are prison effects, but I feel like there's no deck building cost to it. Like you're not building around Narset or around Teferi, and so it feels like it's not the type of prison that I like. On the other hand, Nexus to me is like the most elegant deck in Standard because every single piece in there just does this one thing, and it nothing can replace it, really. It's very difficult to find like a substitute for Tameo, a substitute for Azcanta, a substitute for Root Snare. And so this is this like very elegant deck that also happens to lock people out of games. I would prefer if it didn't, go infinite loops and it found some other way to log the game. But the idea of like this combo deck where you take out one bit and everything falls apart
Yeah.
is the most amazing thing to me. And pretty much every Prism deck in like Modern and Legacy operates that way. Like they're all, you take away one piece and the whole deck just crumbles.
Were you a big eggs player back in the day?
No, I actually did not live through the eggs period. I remember watching some of the Second Sunrise shenanigans that were taking place, but I never ended up playing the deck myself. Looking back on some of the VODs and the matches that I caught, it's a different kind of deck. Like it's very unique, right? Like there's no deck really that plays like it since.
So back in the day when you were playing, did you become kind of like the local end boss? And then what kind of made you decide to take the game from the tables to content creation?
I mean, I think most of what influenced me, like in my early Magic days, all the way, I pretty much quit when Darksteel came out, like after Mirrodin. Ended up moving to Morocco. There was really no scene there. No local game stores really existed. So that was, pretty much a forced stop. But I also didn't enjoy the game anymore at that point because everything became affinity. Like it was just an artifact metagame. And I really, as much as I like single artifacts, like a Tangle Wire, Paradox Engine, some cool stuff that exists, I despise artifact sets. Like in the history of Magic, every single time an artifact set has come out, I think it has ruined the game for years. Like every single one, without question. Like Urza's Saga, doesn't matter. Mirrodin, Darksteel, same problem. Kaladesh, I wasn't even around when it came out, but I can tell that it ruined Magic or the enjoyment that people had of Magic for a while. So I ended up quitting it around Darksteel, and I think if Kaladesh had come out when I was, currently playing, which I wasn't, I would have probably quit at that point again, knowing myself and the general way that I tend to take these things. But my jump into content creation wasn't really tied to the previous history. It came just as a consequence of MTG Arena coming about, because I'd been logging on mid-go a little bit. I play Modo sometimes, do some drafts when new set came out, but like producing content from MTGO was really like you have a very niche audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you still can go on and do the more eternal formats, which I think eventually we're going to be. I'm in that camp of I think that Arena is going to be the ultimate successor to everything digital Magic wise. So, and I'm kind of happy for that day, but some like formats like EDH and stuff where you want to go and have that social experience and play. I like where a lot of people want that on Arena like right now, but I like that it kind of forces me to go play paper Magic. That's kind of like the poker night for the guys or gals, but streaming on Mitgo is. It's just so weird that it comes from the same place, right? Like you have Arena, which is this beautiful, aesthetic wise functioning thing. And then you go and then you have this like almost DOS program looking, Magic Online still.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the same team, right, that worked on it initially. Like Magic Digital was effectively it received a complete facelift when they tried to design MTGA. My understanding was that they basically created a new branch or new team entirely for MTG Arena specifically. And then when the game just came out or, in the beta happened and it just took the community by storm, I think Wizards of the Coast took it even more seriously. It became like this gigantic flagship product of theirs. And it went from being, oh, look at this, new digital game that people looked at like another Duels to, oh, this is probably and potentially a real game changer for the whole of the franchise. So yeah, I'm hoping MTG Arena sticks around and adds older formats, but I don't know exactly what their plans are on that front.
Yeah, and you like we've alluded to earlier in the stream, you've been a premier streamer for other games like Hearthstone. What made you want to make the jump into the Magic the Gathering arena? So, no pun intended. Well, actually, total pun
Yeah, I mean that's actually not bad.
that was a great pun.
Good one. Just smoothly like landing it there.
But I had to point it out and just ruin the whole joke. Yeah.
Which makes it better.
Right.
So it's I guess fundamentally like Hearthstone is a game that before the game came out, before Hearthstone came out, when it was announced, I think at PAX East of whatever year that was, I want to say 2013, but don't take my word for it. There was a trailer that was shown, of cards flying across the screen at like record speed. But if you froze the trailer frame by frame, right, you could actually see some cards and read the text and try to figure out the rule set from the text. And so we tried to compile like all the cards we could see, and we made it. We made basically a custom set on cockatrice, and we played with pre-beta cards effectively. And Hearthstone was really interesting to me in the early days. I jumped into content creation for Hearthstone because of passion, but over time the game felt like it took no risks, it took no chances with its designs. It didn't really try to create a long-lasting, like fun set of things to do. It went down a path that I just wasn't really interested in. So really what I did is I jumped from Hearthstone into Gwent for a while, and then Gwent also ran into some of its own design issues, and I jumped the ship again before it started going downhill. And I just did other stuff in the meantime. And MTG Arena was a bit of a random occurrence for me. I did not even know the game was coming out. I had no clue that this was even a thing in progress. I'd heard whispers, but I mean, I had no idea if it would be good. And then I played it once in the closed beta, and I knew that this is something that I would spend years playing. Just by virtue of how smooth it felt, the fact that it was Magic, and it wasn't, some crappy client. It wasn't something that you can't produce content for. It's actually easy to enjoy this. And while I loved MTGO, the juggling of the finances of it, number one, were not something I was interested in. The constant juggling with the UI of like 17 windows, because I'm not sure how familiar you are with streaming with Go, but like you actually can't window capture, you have to display capture. And so if you have two monitors, like one of them is always on perma use, and like the logistics of streaming MTGO are a bit annoying to me, and I just could not be bothered with that. So yeah, MTGA happened almost by pure accident, really.
And I mean, plus you had some. I mean, you definitely had a lot of experience with Magic as a game too. So
Yeah.
it seems like you're just kind of waiting for them to catch up and be like, because Hearthstone was very user friendly, but it's not Magic, and not to say anything bad about Hearthstone, because there's people still love the game. Do you fear that Arena, I know they just made a big change with Arena now doing like the season passes and stuff like that, but do you feel like it might get to that point where it gets a little stale or stagnant?
I don't think that they don't have to let it become stagnant or stale, right? They don't have to do that. Now, the problem, of course, a lot of the unknowns are tied to what their plans are for the future development of the platform beyond it just being this game that you can play. Like we saw with the rushed implementation of the MPL, there were a lot of unknowns, like how much they're pushing, influencer content. Like I'm a part of that group, so obviously, I can relate a little bit. But the point is, they're really putting a lot of their efforts onto digitizing Magic, right? Like making sure that they carve themselves that spot in the digital scene, in the sphere for a long time to come. And there are a lot of uncertainties that come with that, because WotC is new to the sphere effectively. Like they've been around MTGO, but what MTGO is, to me at least, what it's always been, an extension of the secondary market on paper. That's always how I viewed it.
Sure.
The reason MTGO even survived is because you could redeem the cards you got on there for real paper cards for a long time. Without that redemption process, there are no trade bots. There is none of that infrastructure. At least in the early years and the years that came afterwards, the reason people even stuck to the platform was that. And with MTGA, we don't have that. We don't have the luxury, there are trade bots that are going to carry us. We don't have a secondary market that's going to keep the game afloat with bad monetization models. With a poor distribution model like, card packs on tabletop, a secondary market takes care of that because they sell you singles and they solve the problem. MTGA had to tackle it differently, wildcards and everything. So all the things, the infrastructure that players in the community built to make Magic survive the years is just not there with MTGA. So we don't know what's going to happen with it. But as far as it becoming stagnant, there's no reason for them to let it happen. And if it does happen, it would be a shame, because we can all come up with a plethora of ways to have it not be the case.
At the end of the day, it's still Magic, and that's another reason why I think MTGO has survived also, is because you still get to play Magic the Gathering, and it really is kind of the best TCG.
Yeah.
But really good streamers are very entertaining, and they, with their audience, with the interactions, and they're decent players. But what makes you great is how fluid you are. Like, I love watching your streams. You're super entertaining, you're super interactive, but you play at the highest level. Did it take like a long time to master like the entire package for you?
I mean, I wouldn't say that I play at the highest level. Like I'm probably like I'm pretty self-aware of my own, shortcomings when it comes to Magic. Obviously, when you stream, you play worse. Like that's one thing that I've noticed
Mm-hmm.
consistently. Like it's happened on every game that I've ever streamed. If I'm off stream, my mistakes are like I can watch the VODs and I do to spot mistakes. Like I can tell that my play offline is way tighter than online. A lot of people will say that, oh, well, when you're streaming, you have an audience that helps you out, so you play better. It's like, no, actually, I'm so focused on talking to them that I mispick in drafts. I don't take proper lines. I might rush a mulligan. Like there's so many things you do wrong when you're interacting with people. But in terms of like my skill level, I'm at a high enough level that I look like I know what I'm doing. Like the margins between me and one of the greatest Magic players exist. Like it is definitely very noticeable if you know what to pay attention to and you start testing our skill across multiple formats and the knowledge that we have. But as far as like a shallow pool, like standard, for instance, it's like the edge is really slim. And in Magic also, I think that's one of the interesting things if you follow competitive play is that the edges between like a mid-level grinder and a top grinder, really like the edges are super slim in a given game. It's the long-term performance that really makes the difference. So I think that like my level might not be that great, but the fact that I can, keep it okay while talking to the chat is probably what helps with the stream. Like that's probably what it is, but it's not yeah.
But I think you pilot the decks really well. Like, I personally have learned to be a better mono blue tempo player just by watching you. Where I never put the Terramander out on turn one now, or where I used to kind of rush it a little bit without some kind of backup. Do you think it's more the amount of play, just the amount of reps that you've been doing because you stream so much, or did you kind of figure out how to pilot all these different archetypes kind of naturally?
I think it's that basically over 20 years of Magic, I'd say you see the same patterns repeat over and over. Different cards, different names, but overall they have very similar play patterns. And while there will be differences based on formats, a tempo deck like Mono Blue is very like it's been done before. Sometimes with different colors. Maybe it's not Mono Blue. Maybe it's like blue white or blue red even, or blue green. Hell, we've had that before, and that might even come back in the future. But I think you pick up on a lot of those play patterns. Like a mid-range deck just puts down beaters, and if it needs to protect itself, then it tries to carve its keep its resources at the right time. So I think it's just habit, force of habit. The more knowledgeable you are about a given deck and other decks like it, the easier it is to generalize the knowledge, because it's really not about one deck. It's more about all the decks sort of playing similarly.
Yeah, and it's a little different when between formats too, because I feel like very comfortable in Modern playing the decks that I really know, because you're kind of, it's a finite amount of decks that you're going to play, where Standard's ever evolving. I mean, Modern is too, because it gets infusion, but a little bit it's still not as fluid or ever changing as a Standard, where like Modern, I could sit down with like my Naya allies and play pretty flawless, not flawless, but pretty good competent aggro, or I could play an 8-rack or some kind of control. But then every new tempo deck or even aggro deck, when a new Standard format comes out, it takes me a little bit, even though I'm a pretty competent aggro player or whatnot, it takes me a little bit to learn that format. It seems like day one or week one, you seem to have a pretty good handle on it right away. So I
think generally speaking too, it's more again like principles over particulars, right? It's like, oh, I'm playing a control deck. Well, if you're draw go, you know what you're doing.
right.
Passing the turn, counter spelling, and then your turn comes around. There are like nuances as far as like when you need to play your threats. Like if you have a defensive spell, is this really worth protecting? Like let's say you have a 3/3 and the opponent's on 11 life. Okay, that's a 4-turn clock. But using your protection spell on your 3/3 right now would guarantee maybe 3 damage, but then you don't have follow up. Like there's no point to committing a defensive move here when you can do it later on a more valuable creature. So like all these play patterns I think are pretty similar. Like really older formats completely have me blindsided because of the amount of years that I didn't play. Like even modern, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, like if you're an old school player, you know modern. It's like, no, actually I know more cards in like in the not in legacy, but I know way more cards from before the modern era.
Right.
Because I kind of stopped when modern started. So like all the cards that came since then, like Lorwyn, and onwards, like cons and everything, like I don't have a clue about those. And so when I go to modern right now, I'm at a complete loss. Like I'm just absolutely out of my element. But over time, I think it's something you can work on and backtrack. But I think those are like every standard environment tends to be, I wouldn't say somewhat similar nowadays, but especially with play design, I think they're trying to homogenize power levels a bit. To make sure that there is no, no more egregious design mistake. And if that's the case, then I could imagine a world where like there's more and more depth added to eternal formats, like those non-rotating formats, but the future of standard is going to be very similar to where maybe that principle will make even more sense over time, where like you just have a general idea and it works in pretty much every meta.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could attest to, like I played during when Legacy was Type 2.
Yeah, exactly.
But
That's
I don't know how the interactions are now, and I couldn't play a Legacy deck, piloted as efficiently as I could a modern deck that I'm familiar with. Talking about just content in general, you produce videos at a breakneck pace. Do you carve out any time to enjoy other Magic content? And if so, who does Nox watch?
Oh man, yeah. So I wish I had more time to watch other content creators. That's one of the things a lot of people ask me, like, oh, who do you watch? It's like, well, I wish I could watch more than I do. I have time to catch streams, videos on YouTube. I literally cannot watch. Like, I don't have 10 to 20 minutes to even bite size consume content. I barely have time to even peruse deck lists that people have. If a new deck came out and it's on I don't know, MTG Goldfish metagame. I most of the time don't even have a clue. So it's always a bit of an annoying thing. But when I do watch streams, like I'll be fluttering Huey. I watch a lot. I'll watch a lot of the MPL members. Ben Stark. I watch Deathsea, which is a great streamer. Ali, which is brewing a bunch. I watch Jeff Hoogland when he's streaming Modern. For some reason, like his MTG Arena content, I kind of do the same thing day in day out. So I prefer watching his Modern stuff. I do watch a lot of the Magic streamers that pop up. I don't have like a go-to guy that I always end up on, but there's a ton of streamers that I watch.
There's literally only so many minutes in the day, right? And it's like once you become a content creator, especially like you do, or I produce a ton of content, it's just something has to fall to the wayside. And it's sad because I would love to go out and I used to be able to really promote other people's work, or hey, that was great, let's do a collaboration or stuff. But now it's just so much time in the day being a father, which we'll get to, and all that. It's something has to fall to the wayside. Unfortunately, it's consuming content, which is what sparked the whole want to make content, which is kind of a weird catch-22. But just talking about collaborations, you've collaborated with like Day 9. Do you have any other creators on the radar that you want to link up with?
I'm pretty sure I'm gonna return with Day 9 at one point or another. At the moment, like I've been constantly trying to come up with moments and time frames to get some content done with other content creators. Like Alias V, I wanted to do a Fomander thing with her, where she has this format idea that I think is really cool, where you get to play Commander on MTG Arena, where you basically build a 100-card singleton deck with the color identity of your commander, but because you don't have a commander, you put 4 copies of that legendary in your deck instead.
That's awesome.
So it's like it's kind of behaving like a commander, but it's not. And I thought that was really cool because it's different than Singleton, which ends up often just being a pile of planeswalkers deck. So that was really cool. I wanted to do a content with her, but I just for some reason we can't sync properly. And if she can, then I can't, and I just never find time to get back. There is Merchant that I wanted to do stuff with, Mogwai as well. It's so much. There's so many people. Even Deathsea, like even Twitch Rivals, I think it's taking place today as we're recording this. I meant to hop on and play it with somebody else, but I couldn't get in touch with someone who wasn't already paired up yesterday. So by the time the morning came, I was like, oh well, I guess we just we can't do that.
Yeah.
So it was just like there's so many people that I want to collab with, but syncing time is really tough. Like synchronizing, that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like you recently taken on your greatest challenge by entering fatherhood. Being a fellow MTG dad, I know how much of a struggle it is to maintain the balance of content creation and being a dad. Have you mastered the balance yet?
Mostly, I think my wife, is taking on a lot of patience, and she's helped a lot with that, with the whole making sure that the content can get produced. So I used to have a pretty free-form content creation schedule where we do it whenever I felt like, whether it's the evening, the morning, midday, doesn't matter. Now we have two kids now. A second one was born like 4 months ago, so that's another
Congratulations.
layer of, yeah. But I mean, it's just another extra kid in the family where we have to schedule around, right? Because it
Yeah.
used to be okay, if my kid was at daycare, my wife might be able to go pick him up. Now it's like, well, now there's a baby in the picture, so if the baby is not in the mood to go in the car, then Nox
Baby's not going in the car.
baby's not going in the car. Nox is going to pick up the kid from daycare, which is like we always manage to make it work. And this is one of the things that I feel very lucky for, is that the job I have, or the work that I do, is really letting me spend as much time as I want
Yeah.
with the kids. It's a bit of a double-edged sword because I'm at home a lot, which means that my wife gets to always go, "Hey, are you available to do X or Y?" To which I often have to respond, "Well, actually, no, I can't right now," which always sucks. The kid knows that I'm there, but I can't go.
Yeah.
Uh, and there's the whole balance of time. I think really, as a streamer, it requires a lot of discipline. And one of the biggest challenges that I've got, I wouldn't even say it's tied to the fatherhood itself, like, or having children. It's more finding things that I want to make a video about fast enough to have time to record it before I no longer can. Like, it's sometimes like I need to make a video, and if I only have like a 2 hour period to actually like log on, make the deck, test the deck, brew the deck, make the video, record, upload. If I only have like a 2 hour time span for that, and during those 2 hours nothing comes up, like I don't want to scrape the bottom of the barrel.
Sure.
So it just sometimes that's where it'll become a bit difficult, and then I end up recording like 10 p.m. And that goes all the way to midnight, and I need to be awake at like 5:30 because the kid just goes, eyes wide open. It's just like, oh, it's a challenge, but it's more content creation that's difficult to manage than the fatherhood part. That one I feel like that's pretty cool, and I enjoy it the most.
Absolutely. I have what you got times two. Not my youngest is 5, but I have 4 total. But yeah, I figured out just to sacrifice sleep. So I am
Yep.
a walking zombie, but the kids see dad, and the people get the content, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much the routine. I think sleep is what I eat into the most at this point, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's helpful.
Yeah. Do you have any big plans for traveling to events like Magic Fest in the U.S. or in other countries coming up?
I really wish I could. Like, every single time an event comes up, is announced, like whether it's TwitchCon or some Mythic Invitational, like I've had to decline invites to those events because they have discretionary slots. I've been invited and I had to decline. Even there was a local, I think, like limited pro tour in Montreal last year. I couldn't even make time to go there over the weekend to together. I mean, sure, you could make the argument, well, you don't want to go because you could have, found somebody to babysit or something. But the point is, I'd rather spend time with my kids than go there. But I wish I had had the time to go to those events. And like, traveling is barely even within reason at this point. Like, taking a
Yeah.
because like, traveling is not a 2-day event. A lot of people look at it from a content creator's perspective, like, oh, you're getting a free invite to that. They're paying your flight, they're paying your hotel. Like, why aren't you going? It's free. What if you win? It's like, well, actually, it's not free because like I have the day before is spent preparing to travel. There's nothing happening there. The 2 days, like the full day of traveling, is probably at like a 24-hour dead time. Then you've got about 2 days of event, let's say maybe 3. Then you got to fly back. The day you arrive, odds are it's too late to do anything. So like, what ends up being what looks like a 2-day event is more like a 5 to 6 days stretch of time where no content or little content gets produced. So if I did that, I think I'd have to really find a good like portable setup where I could stream from the hotel room, or some solution like that, which I think is probably workable. But it's an extra bit of grind, and then you also leave the 2 kids with my wife, which is probably just not a sane thing to do. She'll probably just be overloaded.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the Magic Fest Seattle was just here, and I live pretty much like 20 minutes away, and I just couldn't go.
Oh man.
Couldn't-
Yeah, there you go. See, there you go.
Yeah, I hear you, man. What are your long? And this is kind of a weird, loaded question, but what are your short and long term goals in Magic the Gathering?
Oh
This
wow,
is your job interview question, right?
that's a tough one. I think realistically, like long-term goals, I haven't really set like any big ones. I'd say like continuing to produce content, but maybe find new things to do than just deck techs is definitely one of the things I'd like to do. Eventually, maybe some tournament commentary if that's ever relevant. That's something that I might want to get into. I've done some of that for other games, just for Magic though. Like I just my competitive aspirations are pretty much zero. Like I don't really want to compete.
Hmm.
I might enter a tournament for fun, but I don't really tie much of my self-worth to a win or a loss, or my ego or my drive. Like I'm not driven to win because I'm not that interested in competition baseline, which is a negative for a competitor, obviously. Like I will not put the sleepless hours or sleepless nights that Ray Duke puts in to get like the little edges that matter the most in
Mhm.
a large tournament setting over multiple years. And those are usually the most important minutes that you spend. The most important hours are the ones that you spend trying to get those small edges. And so I don't competitively, I have none, but content production wise, I'd like to expand into commentating tournaments that are maybe like private run or like community events that we do. Those are really something that I'd like to do. Short term, obviously the continued streaming shenanigans. That's definitely a thing. But yeah, I'd say growing the community that I've managed to have show up on stream every single day is probably the goal. Like that's really what keeps me coming back to streaming, is the fact that like as much as I love Magic, if I didn't have a chat room to talk to, I would not be streaming. Like period. As much as I love streaming, I don't think I would stream Into the Void for 6 hours a day. Like it's not. I'd go insane.
Yeah, it gets real weird, right?
Yeah.
Just you and the screen. No, that's awesome. I mean, are you here to stay? Do you think is this the home for Noxious going forward? Is in Magic the Gathering?
I can't see why not. I mean, the game seems to not drive me insane. And one of the things that I like this is an important fact. Like I keep saying this, and a lot of people always get very cynical about it. Like, oh, you're a hypocrite, you're full of shit. But the reality is, when Hearthstone started burning me out, I left Hearthstone. When Gwent started burning me out, I left Gwent. And my plan was, I'm pretty much done with streaming at this point if nothing else comes up. Because as much as I love streaming and as much as I love content creation, there is no game that gets me. So what I started working on was, game reviews for fun. But I really didn't have it in me to force the grind. And this is interesting because, it's always been livable. Like I always had livable income under the streaming regimen, but once the game gets to you and you no longer enjoy it, I think it becomes toxic to your mental health. And the problem is you then become, frustrated at everything else around you, which has, implications for your private life, whether it's with your partner, your children, doesn't matter. Everything goes to crap as soon as you hate what you're doing. So I really, for a while, thought that I was pretty much done. And then Magic Arena came around randomly, as I said, and that got me back on. So as long as Magic is a game that I find fun and I don't see that changing, really, I don't see that I would stop. So yeah, I'm probably here to stay.
I'm personally happy to have you in the community, and I'm sure hundreds of thousands of people are as well. So, yeah, I'm stay as long as you like, my friend. Let's shift over. We're at the point of the episode where we're going to play the game Face the D20. So, Nox has a spin down, and each number on here, if you haven't seen this before, correlates to a non-Magic the Gathering related question. So we get to find out a little bit more about the man behind the cards, so to speak. So, are you ready, sir?
Yeah, I'm rolling some dice. I'm
All
good
right.
for that. I'm really good at that. I'm just like top notch.
Inherent skill? Yeah. What'd you get?
17.
17. Favorite book series? I don't know if you're a big bookworm.
Oh God, yes. so many though.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man.
um,
Another thing that I don't get to do as much as I used to. I used to love reading.
oh yeah, no, I feel that in the core of my being.
Yeah, exactly.
I used to read like basically like a book every 3 or 4 days. Like
Yeah.
I used to read. Yeah, it was. I started reading young, and I read every day of my life effectively until probably the whole streaming shenanigans started, and
Yeah.
then even less when the kid was born. But favorite book series. So obviously there's the classics, but you know those are kind of redundant. And then really like growing older, I like them less and less. I'd say probably the Black Company series, which is I mean, if we have to talk about like fantasy books and more like fiction, the Black Company was written by Glenn Cook, and there are, I believe, at this point, 9 books that have been printed, and it's a phenomenal series because the way that he's writing, and I won't give anything away, the perspective that he's taking when telling the story is always different, and I find that great. Like the world building is told through the eyes of the characters, and that's very different because a lot of the time you have like this omniscient take on the world. Like you have the writer telling you more about the world through an exposure, let's say, very different in that way, and it feels very intimate with all the characters, which I thought was absolutely amazing. So yeah, probably I would have to give it in the fantasy realm to Glenn Cook.
When did that series start?
That book was really old. That's before I was born. Were the first ones.
Oh,
but,
okay.
Oh yeah, like they were really old, and I think he's still writing to this day new books. Like I know there's either one that's come out last year, or that's slated to come down this year. I think it was planned for last year, but it didn't come out. And I think it's slated for this year or near the end of 2020. So yeah, it's been a long ongoing series. It just keeps coming out.
Yeah, one of the, like, just speaking fantasy series, I guess a guilty pleasure, because it's not like I'm a big Stephen King fan and all that, but like Terry Goodkind, I don't know if you've heard of the Sword of Truth series.
Of course, yeah.
That was like my jam, and when he finally kind of stopped that, it was funny too, because I used to live in Vegas. He lived in Henderson, which is the neighboring town, but he wrote a book called like the Book of Nines, and it's like, oh, this is going to be completely different from anything I ever wrote. This is a mystery. And then, you know, I guess I'll say spoilers if you don't want to know, skip to this timestamp. But, you know, it turned out being connected to the whole sort of, I'm like, you can't do anything else. This is great. I love it. All right. Let's roll again, sir.
16.
Yeah. Keeping the cluster tight. What animal or insect are you most afraid of? I don't think I've ever asked this question on this show.
Animal or insect am I most afraid of?
Yeah. Do you get anything crazy up in Montreal, like spider-wise, or?
No, not really. And I actually I must be honest with you, I actually quite like spiders. I
Oh.
a few in the office, and I don't mind them.
They keep the other bugs away, right?
Yeah, I guess they do. Yeah, I'm not really scared of too many bugs. I mean, obviously there's a threshold. I think there's a size of spider past which I'd probably freak out. But it's not it's not the first thing that comes to my mind.
Once it's as big as your hand, then then squash it. Yeah.
I think generally speaking, like anything, it's kind of strange, but dogs have been the only animal that I have like a visceral negative reaction to. Because it's about the only animal that I've ever faced. And obviously if I had gone more in the wild and, you know, I had seen bears and whatnot, I might feel different, but dogs are the only animals that I've really like physically felt threatened by at one point in my life. So it's actually kind of interesting. Like we're going to go on a tangent here, but I feel like dogs in the West are viewed as pets and coddled, and, you know, they're beloved and whatnot. Yeah, we have the occasional, you know, husky that turns out to be very aggressive, or the occasional pit bull. But generally speaking, dogs are raised and kept, and you know, they become kind and, you know, man's best friend. But I lived in Morocco for years, and there are feral dogs in the streets sometimes, and you do not get anywhere near them. And there's this idea that, you know, if you can, the dogs are scared of you. No, they're not. Like, they're a pack of dogs and they will assault you. Like, it is no joke. You cannot get near them. And I always have this in the back of my mind when I see a dog. It's like, you know, this is still a wild animal fundamentally.
Yeah.
That's been shaped by whatever environment we give it, but it is still very capable of being dangerous. And I think it's actually doubly true of huskies specifically, because I think they're close to wolves. We tend to think of like pit bulls as being super dangerous, but actually huskies might be even more. So yeah, dogs, interesting, but it's the
That
only
is
one that comes
very
to mind.
yeah. I mean, give me a fucking dire wolf, I'll be happy. I want to ride it like a Stark.
Sure. Yeah, there's a fit. Like the thing is, I'm sure if I had a dog, I would love the dog. Like I wouldn't even be remotely scared of the dog. I would probably like to have a dog, but it's still the only animal that has like this crazy visceral negative reaction from me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have this tiny little Chihuahua that just sits around and complains.
Yeah.
So, but I mean,
Gotcha.
yeah, I don't know. Bug. Oh no, you know what? I'm afraid of bees. Bees, and it's so funny because the aesthetic of the show is a freaking honeycomb. But quick story. I think my oldest is now 17, but I think she was like 9 years old or something. We were at a gas station, and I was pumping the gas, and I get back in the car, and it's just her and I. A bee flies in the cup holder. I just left my 9-year-old. I'm like, I'm sorry. I have more children. We had a good run, but I've never been stung, so I don't know if I'm allergic. I don't want to find out. So I will book it and drop whatever is around me to avoid a bee.
Really? That's interesting. Yeah, when I was young, I actually was afraid of bees and wasps in general.
Yeah.
But now growing old, like I if I can pick them up, I do. Like I actually love them. With the kid, I do that sometimes. Like if there's one on the flower, I get as close to it as I can without bothering her, obviously, or without bothering it. And it's I don't want him to be afraid of that. I try my best to teach him not to be afraid of those wasps. Just do whatever. I don't care what you do to wasps, but bees,
Yeah, I won't. The bees they're not in danger from me because I won't even get close enough to attack them. So I mean, I'm out. You got time for one more roll?
Yeah, sure.
Right.
11.
Number 11. All right, this is a pretty popular one. MCU or Star Wars?
I have no idea. What is MCU?
The Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, you know what? I'm the worst person to ask this question to, because I've literally not, like, up until recently, I thought Han Solo was a Jedi.
Oh God.
And
yeah,
I couldn't name you a Marvel character off the top of my head.
Hey, there's only so many minutes in the day, right? Something's got to fall to the wayside.
I'm assuming Spider-Man is among them, right?
He is in Star Wars.
Okay, he's in Marvel. Okay.
Yeah.
In Star Wars. Are you taking me for a fool? No, the thing is, I don't even I know superheroes. Like I can tell you the name of a lot of superheroes, but like, are they in the Marvel universe? I really could not tell you.
That's Face the D20, Nox. You survived. How do you feel?
Good. It wasn't nearly as embarrassing as it could have been.
Perfect. Any future projects you could spoil or tease for the group before I let you go?
Not a whole lot of crazy stuff, really, that's coming up. I think, generally speaking, I'll be working on more detailed, probably, and that's probably just kind of an irrelevant thing, but detailed videos when a new set comes out, to talk about synergies for new players, to explain what a set's goal is, what went into its design. I'm going to be trying to deconstruct some of that, but that's more, of a long-term thing. I'm not sure when the M21 will come out. I'm still working on it, and probably going to be talking about that with future sets. So that's a different type of video than I usually do, and probably some community-run events that I'll be doing on the Twitch channel once I figure out the logistics of it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, man. Noxious MTG, one of the busiest men in the community. Thanks for carving out some time to planeswalk in on the Hive Mind. Where can everyone find you, sir?
If you're on Twitter for whatever reason, COL_Noxious, on Twitch, Noxious Live, and on YouTube, I'm guessing it's Noxious GLHF at this point. I forget the name. If you type Noxious YouTube, you probably will find it anyway. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's where I live.
Perfect, man. Thank you so much once again. You can find me right here on this very channel. They Said We Said. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe to the channel. You can find me personally on Twitter at OrzovDunn. You could also go over to cardsphere.com, and because they are simply the very best place to buy, sell, and trade your paper Magic the Gathering cards online. Also head on over to inkgaming.com, enter promo code HiveMindMTG to receive 10% off your purchase. If you want to listen to this in podcast form, you could do so by going to all the iTunes and Spotify via constructedcriticism.com. So until next time, Planeswalkers, I'll see you all in the multiverse.